Hello, hello. I would like to thank all you guys for coming to our opening for Mary Kang today. First, I'd like to thank the School of Journalism and Media for allowing us to have this event. I also like to thank the School of Journalism and Media Chair David Wright for supporting the creation of our gallery that we've been able to have. This is our 5th show that we're having here. And so far, I mean, what we wanted to do with the show, the exhibition space, is to use it as a space to promote our alumni. We've had a lot of really great visual journalists and photographers and documentary photographers come through this space, and we've been trying to use it as a way to highlight the great work being done by our alumni, but also our students as well, because we have a student show in the spring of each year. So students in the room, please apply for that when that call comes up, probably late December, or maybe December, January, when we put the call out. I also like to thank my visual teaching colleagues, Donna Cesare and Nuri Valbona, for helping me organize the exhibition. Layla, Manu, and Charlotte, are you in the room? Thank you so much for helping us put the show together. Without you, we wouldn't be able to get it done. So now I'd like to introduce Mary. So Mary Kang is a South Korean American photographer driven by the desire to understand and document the identities we construct for ourselves, which affect how we build our world. Mary was born in Icheon, South Korea, and later moved to Austin, Texas. Through her work, she explores the tensions and limits between individualism and collectivism. Mary has been recognized with awards from the 2022 Gold Cube ADC 101st Annual Awards for photography work she did with Apple. Also received an award, or was a finalist for the 2022 Palm Studios Photo Prize. And just a few weeks ago, received an award from the 2024 Aperture and Google Creator Labs winner award, which is a pretty big deal. So super excited about that. Some of Mary's editorial clients have included Bloomberg Newsweek, CNN Photos, The Fader, Guardian, Inc. Magazine, Intercept, Medium, The New Yorker, The New York Times, Time Magazine, like all of them, basically. And some of the brands, Airbnb, that Mary's worked for, Apple, Disney, Lens Crafters, Levi's, Square, North Face, Korea. Mary is also a member of the Authority Collective and Diversified Photo and Women Photograph. And after Mary's presentation, we will have a reception on the 3rd floor where we have a gallery with 3 of the projects that Mary has made. And we'll have food up there, so there's free food, and probably some sparkling water of some type. So thank you. Mary, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Hello, thank you for having me, and thank you for being here with your precious time. So I'm here to share some of the projects that I've been working on. So I'll be sharing 3 projects, and before I just kind of show some overview of photo works that I do on the daily, like mostly to make a living, but I will start with this slideshow. All right, so I was gonna talk about some things that I do. I think Raymond mentioned a lot of it already, but just to reintroduce myself, my name is Mary Kang, and I'm a Korean-American photographer based in Austin and New York. And a lot of my work focuses around the theme of indie identity and community. And for me, it's important during the photographic process that people I photograph with feel and look dignified, especially those who have been denied such representation in mainstream media. And also through my work, my involvement with collectives such as Authority Collective, Diversify, Women Photograph, and also through my connection with Anita Varma, who's a professor here, I've been having deeper understanding about solidarity journalism, which is all about, which is all about valuing fairness, accuracy, and respect which is a definition of ethical journalism. And so it's been a big part to learn about that more as I go through my career, whether it involves photo documentary project or other forms of photography, such as portraits and even commercials, because as long as it involves human. So, and then, yeah, so these are just kind of the overview works that I've been working on. It's been involving a lot of artists and some entrepreneurs too, and just everyday life people in the street. She's an author, musician, and I think it's almost there. And some of them are my friends from Austin. And yeah, that was also my friend. This was photographed in South Lamar. And then I go into some projects from here. So this photo title is Glimmer. I got to photograph this project while I was working on different project about Bhutanese Nepali community here in Austin. And some of them got to go back to the Himalayan region after they got citizenships here. So I wanted to go back with them to understand more about where they're coming from, their context and background. So when I went there, I was really drawn to all the sceneries and the people there, because first of all, I felt very familiarity with the Asian hospitality there. And then second of all, there's so many mountains and trees. And South Korea is surrounded by 70%, more than 70% mountains. So when I went to the Himalayan region and children playing alongside the nature and mountain, I just felt really connected to my childhood in Korea. And I decided to take these photos to connect with that nostalgia more tangibly. And at the time, I didn't have much ease to go back to my motherland until fairly recently. And so, yeah, when I went, it made me really blissful and kind of did this as a side project while I was there. And the second project is called Motherland. So I got to go back for the first time, for my own decision, to South Korea 2 years ago. Before, I did get to go back, but it was mostly for grandma's funeral and events like that. So I didn't really get to stay too long. And so 2 years ago was kind of when I got to have my own more freedom. And I also felt more urgency to go back at the time because my father passed away during the pandemic, and I wanted to kind of go back and walk around the streets that I had memories with him and with my family from my childhood. And when I went there, I was reminded about the presence and the meaning of the Korean pine tree called Sonamu. And its meaning symbolizes resilience, survival, and life continuing. So when I went back and was reminded of our national tree, I just felt so much encouragement and solace. So yeah, I wanted to photograph the streets and people that I know there. It was a little bit impossible to do street photography in Korea because there's a different context with how people are open to being photographed in public, which is another long story. If anyone's curious, feel free to ask me why. But yeah, it was so sensitive to photograph anyone in the public. Almost everyone I asked for permission, they all said no. And this is the current ongoing project that I am working on. I titled it Norige. So I'm working on this project in Killeen, Texas, and it's a story about Korean American elders who arrived in U.S. after the economically devastating Korean War in the 50s. And a lot of them arrived here between 50s and 70s. And I see them as the pioneering community builder for Korean Americans. But for the longest time, they went through a lot of challenges in this country. There's been a lot of negative stereotype about them being dependent and vulnerable, but obviously that's not true. They are very resilient and strong, and they also are largely responsible for current wave of Korean American. Sorry, I'm just gonna repeat this. Okay, so yeah, this woman who arrived in U.S. at the time by marrying American soldiers after Korean War, they are largely responsible for current wave of Korean American population because they got to sponsor and invite their relatives, and the population multiplied from there. So I wanted to work on this photo story to honor this community, and actually some of them are here. They're in the back. So I found them through the Killeen Korean American Cultural Center, and they do Korean heritage dance, and I find that really meaningful. I see that as like a big form of resilience as they connect with their roots and also spread traditional Korean values. And I initially wanted to work on stories about this community 7 years ago. When I was at UT, I took Asian American history class, and that's where I got to learn more about Asian American stories. And I was kind of upset that I didn't know about this until, because a lot of public schools don't teach that. But at the time, I couldn't find access. I couldn't find right people who would be open to being photographed. So I set this photo idea aside. And what sparked me to come back to this story again was last year, I saw that in popular media, for example, BTS, there are big K-pop group, and their fan base is called ARMY, and I saw on TikTok and a lot of platforms that the fan base calling themselves military wives, and I found that endearing. At the same time, I wasn't sure if the TikTok audiences, they knew the meaning and the weight of the term military wife, and so I thought it was kind of ironic, and so that's why I wanted to share their stories. And yeah, I'm just happy to see that all of you. Oh, they're all here. They're there too. So yeah, they're great, and this is an ongoing project that I'll be working on for at least another year, if they will let me. So, so yeah, thank you for viewing, and so that's it. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer anything.
Any questions, please? The microphone is on your right side of the room.
And I think we can also bring the mic to you if anyone has trouble.
Sorry, I ran too fast. Thank you so much for sharing your work, Mary. I really appreciate how vibrant and affirming all of these images are. The subjects get to look back and be in their element. I think it's so different than so many of the visuals we're seeing right now from around the world, which are really emphasizing suffering. And I wonder what recommendations you might have for visual journalists that are documenting situations that people are in, trying to raise awareness while also trying to uphold that respect and agency for people to not just be viewed as they're suffering.
Right. So I think that in mainstream media, I noticed a pattern that, especially for marginalized communities, POC bodies, there's a lot of images of suffering, and I think it is important to share awareness about real issues that some of the communities might be going through. At the same time, I believe there's still a way to do it while respecting their dignity, because we reserve that a lot for white people, the dominant group, and I think that it should be fair to hold just as much value. And I think also researching is very important. I think that whenever I start a new story project, I do a lot of research to prepare for it, but I also want to check my own biases. So when I walk in and interact with each person, I'm very open to hearing about their experience for more empirical evidences. And I think being open to that and being open to collaborating with them and just checking back and forth with the community, whether they feel rightfully represented, it never hurts to do that.
Mary, I got the idea for this question when you talked about photographing, especially in the Korean culture, photographing people and asking if you can photograph them in public. And I was wondering if you could talk more about that and maybe any other stories you have of, I'm sort of interested in that sort of moment of like tension between, people wanting to be private, but also, being sort of seen in the world, sort of that, and I'm just sort of curious to know like what your experience in South Korea was and just any other experiences that you have about that dynamic.
Yes, thank you for the question. So in South Korea, it was really difficult to photograph strangers that I don't know. I think a lot of people in Korea are a bit traumatized by certain events that happened there. So right before pandemic, there was a hidden camera epidemic. And so a lot of like cameras were everywhere, like without your awareness and without consent. People were filming you in bathroom, in hotel, like Airbnbs. And like even when you're like going up the escalator, somebody will put like camera up underneath your skirt. So I think ever since then, they've been really strict in Korea. Like even when I go to public restrooms, there are signs everywhere. You cannot bring up your camera here. If you see anyone being suspicious, feel free to report at this number. And 2 years ago when I went, I saw this really I saw this old man in the subway, and he was wearing a mask, and his head said something really funny. So even though his identity was covered, I took a photo of that because at the time I was like, oh, this is so cute. And then I put it on my story, and my Korean friend called me in saying like, hey, you might get reported for doing that, especially in the subway. People are very like sensitive about it. So yeah, that all gave me like larger understanding of why people there might not be as open to being photographed. But I think if you like really know someone, they are okay with it. But even things like if you take a selfie and there's like strangers in the back, they kind of get upset that they're in that frame. Like it's very sensitive there. So I started with people that I know when I went to Korea, such as my families and friends. And I think I think when people don't want to be photographed, you just have to respect it. I think Eli Reid was one of my professors here, and he once said people are not obliged to be photographed, and that taught me that as photographer I shouldn't be entitled, and I should be really respectful of someone's agency and autonomy. And then I think also when I photograph someone, reading their body language is really important to make sure they seem comfortable. And I ask every now and then, like, hey, feel free to let me know how you feel if I get too close and something makes you feel uncomfortable. But yeah.
Hi
Alright.
there. So my family, I'm like a military baby, right? But my family's first stationing after Korea was actually in Korean at Fort Hood.
Okay.
And my mom talks about it all the time about the Korean community there, about how niche it is, but also because of the military town, how like tight knit it is.
Right.
And I was wondering, like, where did you get the idea for Korean, and like, how did you kind of like get that? Like, how did you kind of tear into that idea a little bit? Just because I know it's kind of hard to access it if you've never necessarily been there or have like a direct connection. So
Right. So I grew up. In like Round Rock, Texas, since I was 11, and at the time, Austin Korean population was a lot smaller, and so the Korean market here was pretty small. And my mom, growing up, she took us to Killeen a lot because they had bigger Korean market there. And then from there, I saw that there's a Korean hub there, and then I was always curious about it. And then in college, in Asian American history class, I got to learn more about how people, like different passages that people took to arriving in this country. And then, I used to go back and forth a lot and just kind of like get to know people. And people that I interacted with 7 years ago, they were willing to share their stories, but they were very shy about being photographed. And then earlier this year, I did some more research, and then I stumbled upon the organization Killing Korean American Cultural Center, and Miss Heaven, she's the organizer, and I contacted her for possible collaboration, and I told her my goal with this, my vision with this, is to honor them, and she was open to it. Thankfully, they're all open to it so far, and so yeah.
Awesome.
And I take it with so much gratitude because I know it wasn't. It was really hard to ask for their trust, and also I think maybe also because you guys are performers, maybe you're not too shy to be in front of people. So I think that may have helped too.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for sharing your photos. They're so well colored. I love how vibrant they are and how easy it is to like trace a story in them. I was wondering how you found or like solidified a photographic voice here in Austin and through UT. I feel like I also take photos, and I feel like I struggle a lot here in the context of like Texas to really like identify, especially Asian American diaspora, and like how to document them properly. So I'm curious how you did that during your time here.
Okay. During my time here, I had the passion and vision for telling more, sharing more Asian American stories, especially after taking that Asian American history class. And that was at the same time when I was exposed to photojournalism. And I think even though the passion is there, like really executing it is always the difficult part, and finding the access and right people. But at the same time, I think that what's meant to be, it will happen, even if it might take time. And when that time comes, it will make sense more. Because, like, for example, if I was to document this story 7 years ago, I definitely wasn't ready. I didn't have as much awareness about it, even though I'm still learning. And I also didn't have technical skill for it either. Like at the time, I didn't know how to do lighting, to light them well. And I think lighting people is also a form of justice. And so, yeah, I'm kind of glad that it actually didn't work out at the time. And when some things don't work out, I just kind of like to encourage myself by thinking that rejection means redirection. That might be me being the Lulu, but it kind of is a positive way to think about it. But I think maybe connecting with local organizations that advocate for Asian American diaspora might be a good idea too. And meeting with community leaders, I think helps. And then really genuinely interacting with some communities should be helpful. And then, yeah, just like cultivating like real relationships. Yeah. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I wanted to ask you more about ethics, specifically when it comes to journalism and documenting people from the marginalized community. How you spoke about agency. I know that we've definitely worked together. So how do you do that? Can you provide examples of how you do that? I know you mentioned lighting, but for example, like when you worked with me, someone who's disabled, how did you ensure that I felt empowered in the photographs?
So that's hard to project. Like, it's hard to assume that I ensure that people feel empowered or not. But at least during the process, I would like to make sure that they are comfortable. And then after finishing, I like to show them also. Because it's really hard to make assumptions about anything. And even if I do some research and try my best to get to know about certain people and community, I think I just have to be always going in with curious mind to really listen and make sure that someone feels rightfully represented. And yeah, I think it just depends. Like, it's like a situation by situation thing. Each person is different. And yeah, I think also sharing the intention is important. But also we have to like know better, because intentions always not always meet the ends, meet the, yeah, what is it? I'm blanking out on that. Yeah, so. And I think also just like valuing dignity in how people are being portrayed, that's really important. And to learn more about that, I'm actually really excited for Anita's new book coming out next year on solidarity journalism. And I think tapping more into communities that talk about marginalized identities, that's really helpful. I think collectives like Diversify and Women Photograph and Authority Collective, they share resources a lot on like how to document and photograph marginalized identities. So I think tapping into those communities are definitely helpful.
Oh, this is short. Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I just wanted to ask, in a lot of your pictures, you photograph other people's cultures, which can be kind of an intimate topic. Mm-hmm. And it seems like you've built a pretty good bond with some of your subjects, as like they're sitting in the crowd right now. So can you kind of just talk about kind of the emotional connection that you build with some of the subjects that you photograph?
Oh, sorry, what was the last part again?
Can you talk about the emotional connection that you build with some of the subjects that you photograph?
Emotional connection. I think I like to think more about it in terms of intimacy that I build with them through our interactions together and spending a lot of time together. When I first approached Miss Heaven, and I didn't bring my camera with me, I just kind of wanted to get to know her and their community better. And then slowly I will kind of do what I would like to do with documenting them, and then also with other communities. Let's see. Oh, it kind of freezes whenever I think when I do portraits, for example, even if it's assignment, and sometimes they only give you literally 5 minutes or 10 minutes to like make that portrait. And given the situation, I think it's important to still do your best within your control to make that connection with them. Sometimes it's okay to just talk about like how their day was and just to like get them to feel more relaxed. And I think that helps them to feel more like a personable as well. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Osio, I was curious, you mentioned how the mountains of Nepal, I think it was, influenced the way you were photographing and capturing that story. I'm curious if the environment, just in general, sort of that non-human aspect, how that influences the way you approach a story, and if you have other examples maybe of, like, would this story look the same if you were photographing a community, say, in Connecticut or something along those lines? How does the natural environment sort of influence the way that you approach your stories?
I think just the people playing around in the nature and also given that it was in Asia, that's what really got me to connect with what I saw and experienced in Himalayan region. So that would be very different from the mountain region and like children that I would have seen in Connecticut. I think it was just like a sort of the cultural customs and values that went into that connection as well, along with the environment. Yeah.
Hi, I would love to preface that I love your work. I adore
thank you
it.
so much.
It's so excellent. I'm very curious. I was reading earlier in one of your captions that thematically you like to bring up healing as kind of this core part of your stories. I was just curious how that theme of healing is tied visually into your photos.
So I mentioned the term Sonamu, which is Korean red pine tree, and the meaning is resilience and life continuing. And to me, it was a healing to kind of be reminded of that meaning as I photographed that and the environment around. And I think in my photos, I also like to focus on beauty as well, because I think I want it to be like a respite for the viewers. I think appreciating small moments that are beautiful and being able to recognize that is personally a healing process for me as well, because the world is really filled with so much brutality, violence, and like literally every time I open the news, it makes me really devastated. And so I actively had to seek small beauty in small moments. And for me personally, that has been really therapeutic. And so that's kind of like forms that I wanna share with the viewers as well, hoping that it will give some rest and breathing room as well. I think being slow, like kind of appreciating small moments, and like being present in that moment. I think appreciating beauty is also important in photography as well, for just kind of like your own sake of self-preservation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello,
Hello.
My name is Musila. I'm a filmmaker from Nairobi, Kenya. I grew up there and came here for my film education. And you mentioned having grown up outside of the States before moving here, and I was curious about your visual influences or visual references, and if you find a tension between your early visual memories or your early visual vocabulary and your more like formal visual education, if there's a tension between like your identity and your more formal visual education, and how you navigate that.
Sweet, thank you. So I started with photo documentary as I learned photojournalism at UT, and also I worked at the Daily Texan. So my style and form of photography at the time was very straightforward, like youth photography. And over time, I personally got to connect more with subtle moments, and being a little bit slowing down for me kind of changed my style as well. And nowadays, for a lot of my assignments, I do a lot of portrait works. And long time ago, I didn't understand what portrait means. Like, I just didn't understand it. I thought it was just like, okay, someone's just standing there. Until I heard from another photographer say that there's a story in everything. There's a story in somebody's face. There's a story in somebody's wrinkle, hairline, everything. So I remember feeling really inspired by that. And then also the idea of that really helped me to slow down. And so, yeah, I think in terms of style, that's kind of like how it changed by slowing down a lot. And then I think more so than that, it was more important to really get to know why I'm photographing and what kind of message that I want to share and convey through my works. And I think I took a workshop one time with this photographer named Jinchi Cheng, and I was a student at the time too. And I remember being very concerned about finding my own style. And I remember asking him about that, and he also gave me that advice that more so than looking for style, focus on prioritizing like your authorship, and then everything else will come after. So I thought that was really important thing to hear. Yeah, and then when I moved to New York, I mostly moved there to kind of like practice hustling because I have a very shy personality, and I thought forcing myself to be there may force me to kind of interact with a variety of people and industry people. And there I mostly have been learning more like technical skills, I think, such as like lighting and all that. So I think combining all that experiences together, I think it's coming together. I'm still learning a lot. I'm still like not there. But I think just being open to learning constantly helps personally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for sharing your projects and the stories behind them with us. I was really interested in the pictures that you took in Korea, the Motherland project. I thought I could really feel your conflicted emotions that you described about being in Korea after such a long time through the visuals of the photographs. And I'm wondering whether, as Korean American, you both have a connection and a disconnection to Korea.
Right.
And how did that really tangibly influence the locations you shot at, or like how you set up the lighting or choosing the models? You kind of touched upon that earlier, but do you have any other stories related to that?
Stories related to feeling connected and disconnected?
Yes, and that how that kind of identity as a Korean American being in Korea, like not living but actually being physically in Korea,
Yes.
kind of connected how you made decisions about your photographs?
So yes, definitely. I was very aware of my presence there as both insider and outsider. Most of the times I felt more like an outsider, unless I was interacting with my friends and families there. And also with the intimacy that was like hard to gain with strangers that I met outside, I thought that was also like the story in itself to tell. So you might notice that in my motherland photo, it's a little bit distanced with everything that I photographed there. And then, but I think that you can always be creative about feeling both outsider and insider. That's like a good perspective to always have. And you can, theoretically, I think you can apply that in any kind of situation. Yeah, I think even with Korean Americans, I can be outsider and insider at the same time. And I think that duality can also be a strength because it kind of makes you reflect more.
Thank you. 감사합니다.
Oh, thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
I was just wondering, as like it touched on this a little bit in the last two questions, but as a documentary photographer and a storyteller, I was wondering if you could speak a bit about your process. Like, do you go into shooting a certain series with an idea already present in your mind and that influences the way that you shoot, or do you just shoot like instinctually and kind of weave the story afterward? Like, if you could speak a bit about that process.
Right. So yes. So I do kind of like half and half, or maybe 40%, I would say, research, and then 60% being open to, once I get there, reading their body language, listening to what they have to say. I think that has been very important to me, being open. And I always think that whatever I know is only the tip of the iceberg. And there's always gonna be something so much more than what I already know. And I think it's really important to go into each situation with a lot of curiosity and humility and gratitude and respect. So, yeah. I think it's just important to be collaborative. I think Eli always says it feels like dancing. So, I read some other photographers' quote that there is no photography without their story. So I think we have to think of each other as co-creators.
Do you feel like unsure of decisions that you're making in the moment, and like how do you deal with like not feeling 100% about something that you're doing? Like if you're not in a collaborative situation, like do you?
Yeah. So
how do you deal with that?
So if I sense that somebody is uncomfortable being photographed, I just ask or I stop. And also after that I photograph, and if it's gonna be like shared with audiences, then I ask them for feedback as well.
Hi again.
Yes.
So I was wondering about, after you graduated college, like what did your journey from then till now look like? Like how has your were you focused on photography straight out of college, or was that something that you kind of started to focus more on down the road? Like were you always like sure this was your path, or like how did you get there?
Yeah, so for me, my family, my upbringing was very like, oh, you can appreciate art, but it's not something to pursue. So I never even knew about photojournalism major until I came to college. And when I stumbled upon it, I just never felt passion in my life until then. And before then, I thought going to school, learning was just like sometimes it felt like education was punishment or obligation. But when I ran into photography, it was literally the first time I felt some sort of passion. And it got me more curious about different culture, different people, history, or that. And it made me want to naturally learn more. And then after finishing school, I had to prove to my parents that I can make a living with it. But at the time, I wanted to be a newspaper photographer. But when I graduated, all the staff positions were being laid off. And I was like, crap, I need to figure out how to make money with this. And I had to kind of prove that, because my parents were really worried about that career path. So I started my first 4 years after graduating. I did a lot of wedding photography. And I was living at home at the time, so I didn't have to worry about rent. So with my wedding, the profit I made with wedding photography, I self-funded my personal projects, portfolio, and like portrait portfolio, building all of that. And then after 4 years, I moved to New York to challenge myself. And then from there, I was just like open to anything. I was just very like, oh, if all this fails, I can still photograph somebody's birthday party that I can find on Craigslist. And I did do some Craigslist gigs. And there was always, I was like, because I felt like photography is the only thing I know how to do. So I had to like make it work. So I was just very like eager. Like I was like, okay, I can do all that. But there was like a time period one time when even like Craigslist gigs were not like even that was low. So I think freelancing is a tough, it's not easy path to pursue if you're not a trust fund kid. But I think finding that photo community and the friends that have your back and that you can share resources with have been really important, and having mentors, teachers like Eli, Donna, and Raymond, that's really helpful. And there's a lot of forums out there. Like if some of you saw me in the class yesterday, I mentioned the Instagram account called A Photo Editor. They've been really sharing really, really rich resources, such as how to like rate for an assignment and how to form a contract, like what kind of agreement you should be making. A lot of those business aspect, there's a lot of community out there who are willing to help. And yeah.
What did you study at UT?
I studied advertising. Yeah, I came in with pre-pharmacy, and because that's what my parents wanted me to do. And then I really suffered. And then I found that advertising major, I assumed that it might be like kind of creative. And then it's kind of business. So my parents, that was a compromise. But I don't think I learned much creativity in advertising here. It was mostly like media studies. Yeah. And then when I finally stumbled upon the photo class here, that really sparked this dangerous path.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for sharing your work. Your use of color is really powerful, and I was curious to know what inspired your use of, or your inclusion of the, I think it was 2 like black and white photographs in Motherland.
Uh-huh.
What inspired you to include those as well?
Oh gosh, I think it just felt very instinctual for me personally. Yeah, I like rarely make things black and white in my photos, but when I do, I don't really know the reason, to be honest. I think it's just very instinctual. Yeah.
No,
I think it kind of like adds to the intimacy of the photo. It just like made sense for certain photos. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we okay on time?
No? Okay. Any more questions? Any more questions? All right. If not, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And there's reception on the 3rd floor, so I hope you can all enjoy that as well. And thank you for having me.